Hello and welcome back to Religious Studies 361, Ethics. The topics for today's lecture are the death penalty and affirmative action. Let me start by making the distinction between two types of justice. What we call retributive justice and distributive justice. Retributive justice and distributive justice. The death penalty falls under the category of retributive justice. The word retribution means payment. So we are talking here of making people pay for something they did, or if you want me to put it in more mercantile terms, for something they acquired. The idea being that everything has a price. Not everything you buy can be paid with money. Sometimes you have to pay what we call in kind. Remember from the draft, we said the draft was a tax in kind, you don't pay it with money. Well, in this case, you may buy things with money, but sometimes the things you want to buy are too expensive, and then will make you pay for them in kind by putting you in prison or by taking away your life, depending on the case. Okay? So once again, as you see, everything comes down to accounting. It's people making people pay. So it's all a matter of balancing the accounts. That's what justice is in the end. Justice really means equality of opportunities. That's why justice is always represented by this lady, this blindfolded lady with a scale in her hands, a perfectly balanced scale in equilibrium. That's equality. Okay? So these two types of justice, retributive justice and distributive justice, seek equality, seek to offer fairness, equality. In the case of retributive justice, it's a matter of making people pay for what they acquired, which they were not allowed to, but they did. So you want to kill someone that was going to give you a great satisfaction. Well, society is going to make you pay for that. Whenever you get very upset with someone because they did something bad to you, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? You are going to pay for that. It's all a matter of payment. You don't really mean you're going to have to give me $100. No. I'm going to make you suffer. You're going to pay in kind for what you did. It's a matter of paying, balancing the accounts. Okay? That seems to be really rooted in human nature. The idea that if you make me suffer, I am going to make you suffer too. And that's a kind of a payment. You're going to have to pay for that. Okay? It's death penalty. Let me give you some basic information about the death penalty, and then we're going to go more for the philosophical discussion of it. The United States is the only country in the Western world currently that applies the death penalty. The death penalty has been abolished in the whole of Europe, East and West, North and South. In fact, the European Union has made it a condition to have the death penalty abolished before a country may join, or even to join any of the pan-European institutions, courts and stuff. And so all countries, Russia to all other countries in Eastern Europe and Western Europe, have abolished the death penalty, and so has the whole of Latin America, Central and South America. Canada doesn't have the death penalty either. So the United States is the only exception, and is in the company of countries such as China, Iran, North Korea. Japan also has the death penalty, although it doesn't apply it very often. In the United States, not all states have the death penalty. In fact, there are 14 states that don't have the death penalty in their statute books. Michigan was the first state to abolish the death penalty in 1946. As far as nations goes, Portugal was the first country to abolish the death penalty in the Western world in 1867. Worldwide, only 58 countries still have the death penalty today. Of the states that have the death penalty, that still have the death penalty in the US, 10 have declared a moratorium for different reasons, including financial reasons. As we will see, the death penalty is much more expensive. Applying the death penalty is much more expensive than putting someone in prison for life. And in any case, a number of those states that have the death penalty in their legislation either never use it, never apply it, or very rarely. There are a number of states, on the other hand, like Texas and Virginia, but especially Texas, that apply it massively. So, for example, since 1976, the whole northwestern corner of the US has executed 4 people. Texas has executed 451. So there is quite a difference. Right? States that have the death penalty but never use it, haven't used it a single time since 1976. For example, Wyoming, Kansas, New Hampshire, they have the death penalty in their statute books. They never use it. Texas has executed 451 people since 1976. Virginia, 106. Oklahoma, 92. Florida, 69. Missouri, 67. Alabama, 44. California, 13. These are the statistics. Okay? So let me summarize that briefly. Again, 58 countries in the world have still the death penalty. The US is the only one in the Western world. 14 states in the US don't have the death penalty in their statute books. Of the remaining 36, 10 have moratoriums, and many of them, although they keep it on their statute books, do not apply ever. New Jersey abolished the death penalty in 2008. Kansas is about to abolish it. Maryland had a moratorium because they found some glitch in the way that it was being applied. Someone who was innocent was on death row about to be executed. It was some students, by the way, that found out about his innocence, and that really scared the governor and declared a moratorium on all other death sentences. About 1,200 people have been executed in the US since 1976. In 2009, 52 people were executed. In 2008, 37 people were executed. 1999 had the highest number of executions, with about 100 executions. And in 1972, the US Supreme Court suspended temporarily the death penalty because it was being applied in such an arbitrary manner. In 1972, in fact, between 1972 and 1976, between those 2 years, 1972 and 1976, the death penalty, capital punishment, was suspended in the US. The US Supreme Court suspended capital punishment because it was being applied in such an arbitrary manner. Different states had different standards for applying it. So once all of the state legislations were brought into line, then the death penalty was restored in 1976. Okay? So most statistics about the death penalty really take into consideration the years 1976 to the present. About the goals of punishment now. What are the goals of punishment? What are the goals of punishment? Traditionally, the goal of punishment was to make people pay, to take revenge, if you wish, to exact payment from the wrongdoer. from the evildoer. After the 18th century European Enlightenment, punishment, legal punishment, is seen in a different light. And now the goals are, number one, to reform the criminal, so reform, deterrence would be the second goal, deterrence, to deter the criminal. And then the third one would be punishment per se, or to make people pay. Although in the most enlightened states, that is left out. Now, to deter the criminal from further crime, or to deter criminals in general, is a matter of a way of self-defense, if you wish. Okay? Now, let me say something about deterrence. Deterrence is not a moral argument for the death penalty. As you will see, the studies that we have are far from conclusive as to the deterrent effect of the death penalty, as to whether the death penalty truly deters crime. They're far from conclusive. There are a number of problems in there, and we will look at them today. But even if the death penalty turned out to be a truly good deterrent, it would not be an argument, a moral argument for the death penalty. I can think of great deterrence methods to prevent people from being late to class. Say, next time a student is late to class, we'll shoot him. I can tell you no one else will be late to class after that. Okay, I'd probably be in death row anyway, but for anyone, you know. In other words, there has to be proportionality between crime and punishment. There's got to be proportionality. Proportionality is a key moral criterion. And we saw that when we studied the just war tradition. Proportionality is indeed a key moral criterion. So our task here would be, if we were scholars trying to determine whether the death penalty is fair or not, would be to determine whether the price tag we are putting on certain acts, murder, is fair or is too high. The price tag being execution. Okay? Well, for one thing, if you kill the criminal, there's no way you can reform him. So you have to give up the first goal of punishment. You can't reform the person. It all comes down to making the person pay, basically. As far as deterrence, as I said, the studies we have are very inconclusive. And the reason why they're inconclusive is because first of all, the number of executions overall is very small, and most of them take place in one specific state, in Texas. So, for example, last year Texas executed about 30 people, and the whole rest of the country executed about 16 people. And that is then against a background of murders that oscillates from year to year between 15,000 and 25,000, more or less, depending on the year. So with such a tremendous variation from year to year, the effect that an execution that took place in wherever, in Ohio, may have is really very difficult to detect. It comes down to mostly a matter of you constructing, a conclusion out of those sparse number of executions versus this huge variation in murders every year. Especially, as I said, when most of the executions take place in Texas. So, okay, you had 42 executions this year. And this year you've had 17 murders in the country. While last year you had, say, 53 executions, and you had 16 murders or 15 murders. So the difference of 2,000 murders versus a difference of 6 executions. Are you going to draw conclusions from there? Are you going to say that that difference of 5 or 6 executions accounted for this excess of 2,000 murders this